Everyone loves an underdog story. They're some of the most compelling aspects of sport, and Counter-Strike has kept us well fed over the last 5 years with the RMR qualifications for majors. Many pick'ems have been royally minced because of underdogs, and RMRs, the major qualification tournaments, have been some of the most exciting tournaments of the circuit over the last 5 years, due to their high stakes and increased chances for unknown or unappreciated teams coming all the way from open qualifiers. Heading into 2025, RMRs will no longer play a role in major qualification, and teams will simply be invited directly to majors from their VRS ranking. This will make it far more difficult for ragtag teams to qualify all the way to the major. Who knows if this is a good thing or a bad thing yet. But for now, let's take a trip down memory lane and look at the best underdog stories over the last 5 years through the RMRs. In Shanghai, RMR qualification already was mostly through the VRS system, with every region, bar Asia, having their RMRs done through closed qualifiers, with invites extended to teams with a sufficient ranking. However, unlike the new system in 2025, this still works quite well for smaller squads, with teams ranked as low as 205th being invited. In terms of open qualifiers, only the Asian RMR slots had this, and the only unexpected team that really turned heads here was the Drillers, Only Pixel's team, with the sole mission to put his face in the game. They had a relatively interesting run and brought in thousands of eyes that normally would not be watching Pro CS, let alone the Asian RMR, often the least viewed stage of the major. While what Oni did was controversial, going through the Middle Eastern and North African Open qualifier and swapping out to 3 EU players once in the RMR, I think it's a shame that a story like this won't have another shot to go further, given the amazing exposure it gave to Pro CS. Besides the excitement around Drillers, Shanghai didn't really have too many underdog stories, and the playoff stage is the most stacked we've had in years. Besides some of the special mentions of Wildcard, with Stanislaw leading the rookie squad all the way to the opening stage, and Passion UA coming from nothing at the start of 2024 to being one of the most exciting rookie squads. For the most part, Shanghai went as most people would expect, with all 8 playoff spots being held by the best in the world. The one caveat to this was FaZe making it to the grand final, but to be honest, Carrigan always pulls out the whole 9 yards when it comes to majors, even after months of disappointment. Copenhagen, the first major in CS2 and the first major in Denmark, this one was going to be big, no matter what happened. Given the major was in the Royal Arena, it would have meant a lot for a Danish squad to make it to the stage, and in typical Counter-Strike fashion, one of the teams to do it came from nothing: Astatic. Astatic started their Copenhagen run in the open qualifiers, and after a relatively uneventful first place, the only team of note they beat being OG, they made their way to the closed qualifiers. Here, competition was significant for such an untested squad. They were in Group Qualifier A, alongside teams such as Na'Vi and Virtus.pro. Just enough was done by Astatic to give them one final chance for qualification at the decider qualifier. Here, they played Para for a spot, a team riddled with cheating accusations. They were able to use the hope of a home major and won comfortably against Para. Astatic were finally through to the RMRs. Here in Denmark, on land, they were able to secure wins against Monty, OG, and Guild Eagles. With the 3 required wins for qualification, they were shockingly one of the few Danish squads to make it all the way to stage games. First up, in the opening stage, they came up against Cloud9. Unfortunately, they experienced a close loss, despite Kragan putting up some big numbers. Despite this initial knockback though, Astatic went on to win their next 3 encounters against the Mongols, Linvision, and Imperial respectively. They were in the elimination stage. Denmark was probably the most dominant country in all of CSGO, but somehow Astatic, a team of relative no-names, was the only one who made it all the way through to the elimination stage. Pretty shocking, but because of their path that they'd taken to get here, they were crowd favourites, which made it that much more special. This Danish squad was also the only team who had come from the open qualifiers to make it to the elimination stage. They had to play 20 games and 31 maps to get here. Once they were here, they didn't end up making the playoffs, but with a win over Furia and taking a map off G2, they showed they certainly deserved to be here and didn't disappoint their countrymen. Runs like this are what make underdog stories just so amazing to watch. Before we jump in to the next part of this video, Paris 2023, I just want to take this time to ask you to please like this video and subscribe. It really helps me out pushing this video out to more people in the Counter-Strike community. I'm going to continue making great content throughout 2025 and I'm just going to see where this takes us. So subscribe for the journey. Back to the video. In Paris, the final CSGO major, it seemed everyone was an underdog. This major was just pure cinema and underdog central. In the playoffs, there were 4 teams who no one could have possibly expected. Gamer Legion, Apex, Monty, and Into the Breach. While only Into the Breach came all the way from open qualifiers, Gamer Legion, Apex, and Monty were all relatively low rank, and definitely not picks to be in the playoffs. The highest ranked of these 4 coming into the major cycle was Gamer Legion, ranked 29th. For the purpose of this video, we'll just look at Gamer Legion and Into the Breach though, given they were the more insane runs of the 4 underdogs. Into the Breach came through Open Qualifier 1, and were able to make it through undefeated. Nothing particularly special, playing lower ranked teams, but in an open qualifier, who else would you be playing? Once in the RMR qualifier, Into the Breach have a lucky start, playing Ikla and fellow Brits Viperio. After falling to Eternal Fire and 9, they finally prevail against the Finnish side of Havu. English fans finally eaten. Something other than Mezzi or Shmuya in a major. Over in the other RMR qualifier, Gamer Legion had an easier time, heading through 3-0, both teams ending up in RMR Group A. When we moved to LAN, something strange happened to Cypher, Into the Breach's aggressive entry. He'd begun to frag, an Englishman getting kills? Pretty unheard of. After a disappointing start against Na'Vi, losing in OT against an underperforming Simple, Cypher activated. He got 2.24 rating against Sprout. Boom. 1.58 against Virtus Pro. Boom. And 1.19 against Bait in the best of 3. With that performance, they made it straight to the Legends stage. An unknown majority UK team going 3-1 in an RMR. This is what we live for. Gamer Legion were also able to get past their opponents with a 3-1 scoreline, but with a less impressive round difference, it was the Challenger stage for them. In the Challenger stage, Gamer Legion was 0-2 to start, losing against Complexity and Mongols. This was pretty expected. Low-ranked team, no one expected them to go too far, but nope, then they decided to activate and proceeded to reverse sweep the group, and got into the Legend stage with a 3-2 record. Both Gamer Legion and Into the Breach were now in the Legend stage, far further than anyone expected. In the Legend stage, IM, a name that is now a household name in Counter-Strike, activated for the first time. Got 1.27 against Na'Vi, 1.31 against 9, 1.40 against Fnatic, and 1.39 against Apex, for a quick 3-1 and through to the playoffs. Into the Breach at this point really should have gone out 0-3. They were now playing the best teams in the world. There's just no universe they should have had any wins here in Legends, but they managed to squeeze out wins against FaZe, Ents, and Fnatic, with Crucial, Vault, and Cypher all having good games. With a 3-2 record, Into the Breach are the first British org to make the playoffs of a major. It's stuff like this that makes Counter-Strike so exciting to watch. In the playoffs, unfortunately, Into the Breach was immediately destroyed by Vitality, but Gamer Legion, behind a gargantuan effort from Imma, was able to make the grand final. 1.78 against Monty and 1.40 against Heroic to come up against Vitality in the final. Underdog versus Hometown Heroes. This game was super exciting to watch, but unfortunately for Gamer Legion, this is where their underdog run came to an end. ZywOo French buff too strong. In Antwerp in 2022, one team comes to mind, the Bad News Eagles. This team was made up of relatively unknown players, and they came from an underrepresented country, but they were still putting up big numbers against the world's best. This is why I love the open qualifiers and RMR system for the majors. Coming into the open qualifiers for the second RMR, it was a surprisingly hard group for an open qualifier. The Bad News Eagles were playing future big names such as Fame, Norbit, Sun Pius, Nerds, U-Jerks, Aros Dos, and more. The beginning of 2022 was clearly a big year for breakout future stars. After 2 years of online grinding, and Stockholm being mostly played by some of the old guard, Antwerp was the year many young players would begin to be noticed. Despite surprisingly robust competition in the early major cycle, Bad News Eagles were able to qualify for the European RMR. In the RMR, wins against Entropic, ASG and Sinners got the Eagles through to the Challengers stage with a 3-2 record. With losses against G2 and NIP, they weren't too damning. NIP wasn't quite as embarrassing back then. In the Challengers stage, officially in the major, a first for all of BNE's players. This point of the major, the Challengers stage, is when viewers begin to notice these smaller, previously unknown squads. They can be called legit, and fans can begin to really huff that copium. With wins against Imperial and Internal Fire, and losses against Fours and Ents, BNE went up against MIBR for the final spot in the Legend stage. This game was pretty insane, and when BNE pulled out the win, you could see the passion. The excitement to be in the Legend stage was just electric.
Up against an AWP, Flatro's done it, and so have the Eagles soaring to the Legend stage!
I mean, this is what it's all about, and it may not be possible come 2025. The fairy tale run came to an end in the Legend stage, with no wins and a 0-3 record. But goodness me, this was a great run to watch, and it really makes you think anyone can make it. In terms of majors with RMRs, Stockholm and Rio didn't really have any crazy underdog runs from qualifiers through the RMRs and into the major, like Paris, Copenhagen and Antwerp. But they provided some quality Counter-Strike, and some stories years in the making had their I's dotted and their T's crossed. But some special mentions would be Furia at the Rio Major, making semi-finals in front of a Brazilian crowd, but given they were ranked 7th in the world at the beginning of the Rio Major cycle, it really can't be called an underdog run. And Stockholm, to be honest, went exactly as you would expect. 57% of people got a diamond coin, predicting Na'Vi and Zidpool to win. Maybe it's just me, but seeing these teams come out of nowhere and go on these fairy tale underdog runs all the way through the major is pretty inspiring. And it makes more casual players like me think, maybe that could be me. I mean, definitely not, but it definitely subverts expectations and keeps the games interesting. With RMRs no longer existing moving forward, I suspect true underdog runs to be less common. Teams are needing a certain level of experience to even have the opportunity to be invited to a major now. This could be a good thing, providing more consistent Counter-Strike and better games in the long run, but I think it could lead to stagnation in the scene. With fewer opportunities for teams to make it into the major, fewer teams would take the risk to pick up a team. With fewer teams, fewer players will have the opportunity to make that jump from amateur to pro. It remains to be seen the macro effects this change will have on the major and Counter-Strike as a whole. But I'm going to keep my eyes peeled, and over this year we'll see all of this developments, see how Austin and the next major go, and then at the end of 2025 I'll make a follow-up video to this and have a look at the changes. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for the last few months. It's been really fun making all of these videos, and I'm going to continue doing it into 2025. So I'm recording this on the 1st of January, hoping to get quite a lot of videos out this year. So yeah, subscribe for the journey, guys. This is going to be big.